Absolutely. So, we've been very blessed. We've had the same crew for 13 years. And so everybody I work with was very close to Frank.
For over a decade, Mike Wolfe has taken reality television by storm. From rummaging dusty garages to picking up forgotten treasures, fans just can't seem to get enough of his show. But beneath the success, stories, and evergreen television moments, controversies seem to attack everything that he has built. From a shattered marriage to losing Frank Fritz, he just couldn't catch a break. Could the world really be experiencing the fall of another television giant? How does his relationship with Frank impact his legacy? Join us as we discuss the rise and tragic fall of American Pickers Mike Wolfe, the boy who found gold in trash. Reality television stories don't get any more touching than Mike Wolfe's. Grew up without the guidance of a father, was raised by a single mother, started collecting antiques before he turned 7 years old, and has now made a career out of it. But just over a decade later, the world might be experiencing an unprecedented fall in his career. Suddenly, everything he built seems on the cusp of fading away. But to figure out how the crash started, viewers tend to flash back to how it all began. Unearthing hidden treasures, antiques, and collectibles has never really been a new concept in the reality television space. In fact, between the late 70s and the early 2000s, there were programs like Antiques Roadshow, Critiques Detective, and Cash in the Attic in the reality television space. But none of them were American Pickers. Mike was born in a small town called Joliet, Illinois, and somehow picked up a serious interest in collectibles. At first, it started with bikes. As a child, his mother couldn't afford one anyway at the time, so when he got the chance to take some home on a certain trash day, everything changed. He found a few people throwing their bikes out and preparing to get new ones. And for the first time, something came alive in him. It was almost as if these rusted pieces of history were calling to him, and he could definitely fix and store them somewhere. At first, it wasn't easy to get his mother's approval. She was a single mother, raising a son on her own. There was no way she could be happy with him missing school, and he knew that too. However, making her son happy seemed to matter to her as much as discipline. So she drove him on some of his hunts as a kid, and just like that, she unwittingly built the future of American reality television. But it gets even more interesting. While Mike seemed like a handful on his own, he still needed someone else's. Not a backup, but a partner who had different qualities from him but shared his grit, passion, and vision for collecting valuables all over America. It wasn't long before he discovered longtime friend Frank Fritz, who shared his obsession with collecting antiques, but also became a part of a journey that grabbed reality television by the scruff of the neck. But just how did it all unfold? Dusty back roads brought to live television. Before 2010, Mike had built himself into a world-class hunter of rare items. From vintage Harley-Davidson and Indian motorcycles to Nazi-era watches, he was building quite the portfolio. While he loved that he could pursue his dreams, he imagined a part of him was missing. He loved the idea of being on television, going on a hunt for items with over 1 million people watching him. But there was one problem. He did not have a sponsorship deal. According to him, he floated the idea around to a couple of his friends and people he worked with. But only Frank didn't make fun of the idea. To others, it seemed rather impossible to find a network willing to risk its reputation on two middle-aged men looking for antiques in dusty back roads and forgotten garages. But Mike wasn't the type to simply throw in the towel just because no one was accepting his pitch. So in 5 years, he put in the work. He recorded his own videos, rummaging through trash in different locations, looking for collectibles. Fast forward to 2010. The History Channel accepted his pitch, and reality television definitely thanked him for it. Oh, the actions were intense, and the settings felt surreal to most fans. And this time, Mike wasn't alone. Although his own antique shop, Antique Archaeology, was the designated setting, he brought on Frank Fritz, too. After high school, Frank worked as a firehouse investigator and mostly collected firehouse memorabilia to match that energy. But on January 18, 2010, he was appearing on television with Mike on a new show on the History Channel, American Pickers. Probably a rather basic name for a television show, but fans saw past that. Their chemistry was undeniable. On screen, they had the perfect relationship. They bounced off each other so perfectly. It almost felt like they were more than friends. Even though they shared the same passion for picking, they connected on more personal grounds. Both men had grown up without a father and experienced firsthand what it's like to learn to be a man with no male figure at home as a model. Maybe they were indeed more than friends. But even after many years of trailing back roads together, enjoying the thrill of the hunt and the joy of discovery, something was brewing behind the scenes. Fans noticed Frank's sudden quietness. The banter felt forced, and his appearance on the show dropped drastically until he no longer made any appearances. At first, it seemed like a simple hiatus with an unannounced return date. However, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into years, and Frank was nowhere near the screens. It wasn't long before the rumors started. Was there a fallout between him and Mike? Did he take a break from the pressure of fame? But more importantly, why was Mike quiet about this obvious void? Fans demanded answers, but was it exactly what they wanted to hear? An empire under siege. A few weeks into Frank's departure from the show, some sources reported it as a simple break. But it was neither simple nor a break, was it? While some rumors swirled around his situation, the truth always seemed so close, yet so far away, until his interview with The Sun, when Frank tore down the veil. After the episode Burlesque Queen on the show, Frank and Mike basically disappeared from the show, but basically because of the COVID-19 pandemic at the time. However, when they had a chance to return, Frank needed surgery. According to him, he felt that his back was on the verge of falling apart, so he underwent the surgery. His spinal cord was leveraged with a rod, and he needed at least 185 stitches to piece him back together. But getting a spinal surgery was only a part of Frank's story. In his interview, he told tattered tales of the real Mike Wolfe. Frank claimed that Mike hadn't called him in 2 years since he left the show to fix his spine. To most fans, those weren't just words. They were loaded semi-automatic weapons aimed at the heart of the show and Mike's carefully curated image over the years. But it gets even worse. Not only had Mike shied away from calling him when he needed a friend the most, but Frank suggested that he also played a part in the reason he never returned to the show. And for the first time, fans believed that their favorite show might be on the verge of falling apart. But what made the interview even more explosive is the picture that Frank painted of the reality between the pair. For years, fans had watched Frank and Mike argue and bicker like children at a board game. But Frank claimed that they were never friends, leaving unanswered questions for long-term fans. Was their favorite reality show all a lie? Have the pair really been playing everyone for fools for almost a decade? Frank suggested that the only reason they were ever able to connect on the show came from their will to be on television and survive the cutthroat industry. They already had chemistry from knowing each other anyway. What does it really take to build a relatable image on that? But it gets even darker when some part of the fan base is finally proven right. Although both men were important to the show, especially for the fans, Frank believed that the network always placed Mike ahead of him. They rated him highly, and the earnings reflected it too. Suddenly, what appeared to be a Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson partnership was being painted as a superhero and sidekick relationship. While Mike had remained mostly silent about Frank's disappearance, the once united American Pickers fan base was starting to slip into a segregation he might not be able to control. What happens when the building blocks of a legacy he built in pain, blood, and sweat start to wash away? Damage control. Mike, who had mostly played the silent card, soon figured out he was out of options, especially after Frank's interview. Frank had created a narrative that set them apart, but Mike wasn't having any of that. In fact, he claimed that they had indeed been friends from their childhood. As expected, his response tore the fan base apart even further. At that point, it was his words against Frank's, and winning seemed quite difficult, especially since he made no real comments about this supposed friend until he called him out. Were these really the words of a broken man who had watched his longtime friend tear down their friendship, or a businessman leaning towards damage control? The narratives were endless, and the speculations were sickening, and American Pickers suffered the consequences of this split fan base. Ratings suffered, viewership dropped, and critics speculated that the show might be coming to an end. But what lengths was Mike willing to go to make sure that never happens? Fast forward to September 30th, 2024. Frank Fritz passed away from a stroke. While it is an open secret that his relationship with Mike was not exactly as it used to be, Mike claimed that he was right by Frank's side until he passed away. According to his account, he drew his last breath in his arms, but some critics found some of Mike's words difficult to believe. For context, before Frank's death, he had never publicly rebuilt the burnt bridges between him and Mike. But somehow, he died in his arms? To some fans, it just seemed too easy to claim that they had reached a resolution when Frank could not respond to these claims. But Mike wasn't stopping there. In November 2024, just a month after Frank passed away, Mike had a tell-all interview with People magazine, and his revelation about Frank shook the franchise to its core. He claimed that Frank's return to the franchise was hampered by Frank himself. He suggested that his divorce from his wife in the COVID year got to him so badly that he relied on some chemical courage to stay functional. While that might fly when he was away from work, returning to the field was a much different kettle of fish. Mike claimed that the network requested a clean urine sample with no traces of the controlled substances in it. However, he was too hooked on them to provide any. Like every good friend, he claimed to have fought his battles in the shadows, begging the network to give him a chance at rehab, then letting him back on the show. But according to Mike, they refused his advances, and Frank also refused rehab. At that point, it was one of two things. For some fans, Mike was telling the truth, and Frank should have done that. But critics remain skeptical about the timing. Why wait until he was gone to make these statements? Why didn't he call him out when he had a chance to deny or accept his claims? But as fans continue to debate his reason, the real elephant in the room that everyone shies away from is Frank's finite absence. He was surely no longer returning. That only meant one thing. Mike needed to make a decision on continuing the show on his own, as the only picker, or find a replacement. What will Mike decide? A lone wolf. Selling a show about picking valuables from the back roads and dirty garages was never going to be an easy feat. But Mike had always eaten tough for breakfast, so he made it work. The formula was simple. Introduce the job, expose his archaeology company, and, more importantly, raise the emotional stakes by adding different personalities, including Danielle and Mike. Talk about a reality television atomic cocktail. In the grand scheme of things, it all worked out, especially because American Pickers wasn't just the Mike Wolfe show. It was the Mike and Frank show. But how do fans ever move on from a two-man show to a solo gig without question? After his explosive interview with People magazine about Frank, he gave no further explanations, nor did he make excuses. It was just stone-cold silence. At that point, he had been on television for almost 12 years. He had seen it all, especially how the PR machines work. So he tried the oldest celebrity trick in the world, drowning the narrative in a deep pool of silence. Maybe that might have worked if the missing cast member was someone else, but how do you get fans to stop talking about a man like Frank? He wasn't just some guy who rode shotgun with him on their famous hunts. He was an important foil that made up a huge part of the show's rating. For context, he was street smart and could sell water to a pool on his day. He could talk anyone into letting the pair search their old garage, backyard, or just anything at all. How does anyone replace a character like that? It was almost impossible. But continuing a two-man journey solo wasn't always going to be an easy feat, and Mike knew it too. As a result, he reportedly talked the History Channel into a decision that no one saw coming. The message was simple. If fans really couldn't wrap their heads around watching a two-man show become a solo gig, then he was going to bring in someone else. But just like he had played the game since Frank left, he moved in silence, fostering his brother's admission into the show. His brother, Robbie Wolfe, was also a collector who had been on the show numerous times and was even featured in 2022 episodes. Although it wasn't the first time Robbie had appeared on the show, replacing Frank on American Pickers wasn't exactly on any fan's bingo card. Viewers did not take long to react to the action. Although he moved in silence, the consequences hit with a bang. In an instant, the show's rating dropped significantly, with more than 200,000 viewers pulling out of the show's usual. While he had split hairs with his decisions, some fans were completely at peace with his brother replacing Frank, and others screamed nepotism. To most fans, that decision was the unveiling of the real Mike Wolfe. Maybe, as Frank claimed, he is just as ugly underneath, like the rest of us. But if Mike continuously fails to keep the fan base united, what's next for the American Pickers and Mike Wolfe? A looming fall. For years, Mike Wolfe seemed like the untouchable television genius who made everything work. Somehow, he survived the Frank Fritz controversy and survived the nepotism rumors. Yet the American Pickers fan base remains divided. It is barely news that reality shows are canceled when viewership drops and ratings tank. But could American Pickers be heading down the same dark path? For context, Season 27 of the show has been airing on the History Channel even in 2026. However, the show has not been renewed for a new season. While Mike claimed that the show is on a long hiatus, as he prefers to focus on other projects, his shopkeeper, Danielle Colby, seemed to have a different idea. Danielle claimed that the show was probably done and dusted after Season 27 no longer aired. However, Mike, who has always had that suspicious sense of timing, publicly claimed that the show is nowhere near done. Although he had claimed that the show wasn't coming to an end as a rebuttal to Danielle, fans still had questions. Was it a desperate attempt to save face? Or did he really keep the show alive? But even as his show seemed bulletproof, parts of his life were unraveling, away from the cameras. Imagine losing a 23-year-old relationship during a pandemic. Well, Mike didn't need to imagine it. It was his reality. For context, in 2020, just like Frank, he was also battling a separation. Before the fame and the controversies, he had been with Jodie Faith since 1994 and dated for 15 years before their marriage in 2012. And just like that, the very fabric of his personal life started to unwind, almost leaving him unclad. Jodie left him in 2020, citing an irreconcilable difference as her reason. Frank left the show and then died in 2024. But the fan base remains divided. Yet, he still stands. But how much more can he really take? Maybe that is really his legacy. A man who gets knocked to the ground every time, but never stays down. Whether he is still standing when all is said and done, only time will tell. Do you think Danielle knows something we don't about the show? Do you think Mike services this looming fall? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.